he was a major by this time, I think. It's Major Broadhead. Am I supposed to go on that Russian trip tomorrow? And Broadhead said, well, you were, but you weren't here, and there's a certain amount of shots you have to be given. It's up to Doc Snedden if he thinks you can handle it. Snedden says to me, I have to give you 3 in each arm and they're tough. You want to do it? I said, I sure do. He says, okay. So we went down to his office and he gave me 3 shots in each arm and it was tough. I don't know what the heck, tetanus, typhoid, whatever. And my arms were so sore I could hardly lift them. But you know, we were only airborne about 15 minutes and all of that went away.
What was the attraction of going to Russia? What was the appeal there?
Well, this was, yeah, I forgot to tell you about that. This was the second shuttle run from England. It originated in Italy. The idea was that we would punish the Germans from every angle, from Italy and from England, and we would go to Russia and then back down to Italy. They weren't safe anywhere. So we took a wing of B-17s and we took them up along the northern ridge of Germany, and they bombed up there, and we were giving them close escort, and then instead of turning around and going back to England, we headed for Russia. Now the bases in Russia were, for the heavy bombers, they were using Poltava, and the fighters were using Piraten. So we took them to Poltava, and then we went over to Piraten and landed. And we flew a couple of missions for the Free Poles that were holed up in Warsaw. They were playing the Warsaw Concerto. They were defying the Germans. They wouldn't give up. And we tried to give them what assistance we could. The heavy bombers bombed, and as fighters, while we stayed around there and shot anything that moved around. Then in after about 3 days, we were due to depart for Italy. And the Colonel Graham was leading the group. Now we were an exaggerated group, I forgot to say that too. A normal group would be 3 squadrons of 16, which is 48, and 2 aborts for each squadron that would remain until the aborts weren't needed. If anybody pulled out, an abort filled in. So, but in this particular mission to Russia, there were 72 of us made that. So we had everything that would fly apparently in our field. And we took off for Italy, and my airplane wasn't acting right, and I got it airborne, and I was trying to keep up, and I finally had to call Colonel Graham and tell him that I had to drop out and go back because I was having an engine problem. And he said, okay, go ahead. And I turned around and went back, and whatever else the Russians did, they were absolute experts at camouflage. Because I circled that place for 15 minutes before I finally found the airfield. What it was, see, we didn't have a regular airstrip anyway. It was steel mat laid over grass, and that made it more difficult too. But I finally found it and got down and landed, and I taxied over to the hard stand, and I had a Russian crew chief and an American crew chief. And I told American crew chief, I said, I don't know what's wrong with the engine, but every time I advance power, it had quit on me, backfire and quit. And he says, well, Lieutenant, I got to tell you, the Russian inadvertently put 80 octane in your tank. We would normally use 130 British, 100 American. And I said, really? And just about that time, I see this little Russian officer come hustling over, and he's excited and flushed in the face and everything. He comes over, And my American crew chief says, uh-oh, this looks like trouble. And he asked the Russian crew chief what had happened. The Russian officer did, and the Russian crew chief told him. And he turned to the American crew chief and said something to him. And then he pulled out his revolver. And a Russian revolver is about this long. It was the biggest thing I ever saw. And I knew what he was going to do. He was going to shoot this crew chief, the Russian, not the American, Russian crew chief. So my American crew chief and I jumped in between them. And I outranked this guy, so I ordered him to put his pistol away. And I got him cooled out. But I was assured, in my own mind, he was going to eliminate that crew chief. Life didn't mean anything over there, you know. They had been through the horrible things with the Germans. And so we waited around, and they had to dismantle the whole system and drain everything, and it took a couple of days. And finally, we went into this little village, but there wasn't really much to do there in Patriotic. It's right out in the middle of a bunch of collective farm. And I got a note was handed to me. And I said, "What's this?" And the sergeant said, "Well, it's from our headquarters here." And I opened it up, and it was an order for me to assemble my other 4 pilots. And we were ordered by the Russian to leave the next morning at 600 hours. We were ordered to fly a course of such and such at such and such an altitude for so many hours. And I said, well, I better get everybody together. So I called the other 4 pilots together that night. But in the meantime, we had a couple of guys from Italy, P-51 jocks from Italy, that had come in there for emergency repairs. They got shot up near O.L.C., I guess. And one of them was a major, and the major couldn't have been 20 years old. The other guy was a captain. So both of them outranked me. But I was in command of because I was the ranking guy with the other 4, technically I was in command. So I had the map spread out on a table like this, and the guys were assembled around the table. And I said, now here's where they want us to fly this course. And the major down at the end, the young fellow, he said, "Lieutenant, do you mind if I say something?" I said, "No, absolutely, this is your area, go ahead and tell us." He says, "Well," he says, "if you know the Russians, this is obviously a ruse. We're going to fly right over the heaviest German and Russian anti-aircraft emplacement on the entire river. There's none heavier." So I took the maps and shoved them down to him. And I said, "Major, would you mind taking over and leading us then?" He says, "No," he says, I'd like to. So he took us on a course that was 20 degrees north of the Russian course. But when we got to the river, he made a point. He says, "Now take a look down there where we were going to cross that river." And they had sent up the flak already, figuring that we were going to fly over it. We were due there. But he says, that's what we just missed.
The flak from the Germans or flak from the Russians?
From both. We couldn't tell, yeah. The major had said that he said, they don't care. They'll shoot us down just like they'd shoot down the German. And the Germans are shooting at you too. So anyway, the 2 young guys from Italy, they disappeared. I was still with R4, and we split up into 2s because we were picking up B-17s coming back from O.L.C. that were pretty well shot up and needed protection. So we separated into 2s, and we tacked on the 17s and took them back out to the Baltic Sea or whatever it was there, and before we crossed over into Italy, and left them there. They were safe by that time. And I went in and landed at Lake Lucina. That's where I was supposed to go. And they said, this is in Italy. They said, we don't have any room for you here. Go to San Severo. And I said, where's San Severo? And they showed me on the map. Okay, so I flew down to San Severo and went in and landed, and it was a huge place. They had RAF guys there, about 3 fighter groups of RAF. It was an enormous place. And so I went to the billeting officer. I said, listen, I'm just in from the Frantic operation. I come down here from Russia. And where do I billet? And he says, boy, he says, let me see. He said, oh yeah, Major so-and-so is gone. He's on holiday to Rome or someplace for a couple of days. So you take his bunk. I says, okay, so they flew a mission the next day and they couldn't find me because nobody had a record of me being there. And they were flying over to Yugoslavia to help Tito and the rebels over there that were fighting the Germans. And so then after a couple of days, they decided that I was still part of the group, and we flew back to England. And you know, I noticed in my flight log the other day, I was looking at it, it was a 7-hour trip from Italy to England. Can you imagine sitting in a single-seat fighter the size of
It'd be pretty uncomfortable.
P-51? Well, you know, your legs give out on you. At least mine did, because I'm a long-legged, and P-51 was made for guys with shorter legs, because I used to take the pedals and kick them forward, and then the pedal would fall back, and I could put my feet on top of them like that, instead of being up like this, you know. And it was kind of embarrassing a couple of times, because we were jumped, and I tried to get the pedals straightened out so I could steer the aircraft. But anyway, we went in and landed at on the final leg of that trip, and we were through 3 war zones, and I forget how many aircraft. We actually, I think we shot down about 8 or 10 aircraft on the legs around there. Never lost a bomber, never lost a fighter, and now whether it was worth it or not, I don't know. I think that kind of confused the Germans. You know, they just didn't know. They didn't know what was going on, especially when they got a big wing of B-17s that all of a sudden swings down into Russia instead of turning around and going back to England. That had to confuse them too. So this led us up to the impending Battle of Holland, which was called Market Garden.
That was Montgomery's idea.
Yeah, it was Montgomery's idea. And they made a movie of it, you know, A Bridge Too Far. And it was a bridge too far. I was involved in 2 days of it. I was a flight commander by this time. I'd been a flight commander for about 10 missions by that time. And I had 11 other guys besides myself, and they were all eager beavers. They'd just come over, and they wanted to get in their flying time. And I said, listen, you guys, if I give you guys time and I have to stand down, then all my buddies are going to be back in the States having a great time, and I'll still be over here with you guys. So I said, I got to do some of the flying. I'll let you guys, you know, I'll schedule you guys to fly. So I flew out of the 3-day mission that we were active on that Market Garden. I flew 2 of them, the opening day and the 19th. I stood down on the 18th. But on the 19th, we went over, and we were on we split up the squadron as a 2-half squadron. And I was with our squadron leader. By this time it was a different squadron leader. And we went on up to the Zuider Zee, and we were looking for trouble, and we heard it on our radios. When guys get into a fight back in those days, everybody did it. They get excited and they hold the button down when you're swearing and shooting and you're holding the button down. Everybody else can hear you that's on that channel. So we were hearing a lot of this going on right away. We got within about, I'd say, within probably 50 miles of the Zuider Zee, and we heard this activity, so we knew what had happened. So the squadron leader said, let's do a 180. So we did a 180, and we started to come back towards the noise, which was down near Arnhem and Nijmegen, and the squadron leader said, drop tanks, and just about that time, all of a sudden 3 airplanes went right by my nose like this. There's a ME-109 and a P-51 and 109. So I rolled over on him, the last guy, and we're going straight down. It was in the Nijmegen area. And my wingman was a chap named Blanchard, and he's protecting me. So I'm about ready to take this guy out. I've got my gun sight on and my camera switches on, and I was using one of the new K-14 gun sights, and they had 2 diamonds, and once you put those diamonds on the wings, one on the left and one on the right, if you were able to get those on them, he was within range, and it was all done electronically, and it was very good if you were able to do it. And I was just getting those diamonds on him, ready to send him away, when all of a sudden I picked up a lot of 20 millimeter going over my left wing, and I had to break away from him to see who was shooting at me, and I broke away and up, and I wonder what happened to Blanchard. He was supposed to be protecting me. Well, when I saw those 20s going over me, I didn't realize it at the time, but that who was ever after me was shooting at me and hit Blanchard, because I climbed up to 10,000 feet to give me some maneuvering room, because I knew that the German couldn't stay with me in the climb, and I have a good advantage when I get on some altitude on him. I got up there, and there was nobody. Nobody followed me up, and I thought, well, what's going on here? And I really, the way I explain it is, I was scared, I was mad, and I was absolutely enraged that I couldn't find anything. So what I did was I dumped the stick forward and dove back down into the fight to see who it was that didn't come up with me, and there was nobody. But there were 9 burning wrecks, an area of about 40 miles around Holland, like that. 5 of them were ours, I think, or 4 of them were ours, and 5 were German. And there was nobody. And I called on the phone and couldn't raise anybody. So I wondered what had happened to Blanchard, and who was the guy up ahead of me, the American. I got back to the base and landed, and they told me there were 2 of our aircraft didn't return. One was my wingman, and the other was the group leader that day. And I thought, that was the group leader that was in front of me, that I was trying to save him from whoever was shooting at him. And if you fast forward to 1991, I got an email from a Hollander who lived in the area near Nijmegen, but he sent me this email and asked me if I was the one that was involved on the 19th of September of '44, and I sent him an email back and said I was. And he said, I know who shot down your wingman, what happened to him, I know who your enemy was in front of you. His name he was a Hollander who was a member of the Dutch Air Force, but he was also an airline pilot for KLM. And these guys used to go out on their weekends, or when they had time off, and they would fly around Holland and Germany and France and Belgium and research wrecks and get all the data, you know, which was really useful for everybody. And he sent me an entire map showing me, and he said, your wingman, James Blanchard, and his airplane were in this canal, and the Dutch discovered them in 1946, so that was 2 years later, and Lieutenant Blanchard was still in the airplane, and so they had positive ID because of his dog tag and everything. But as an aside to this, what happened to Blanchard probably was that he couldn't get out of the airplane. He was probably shot up. Now, I'd say that because James Blanchard was a utility pilot who had worked for one of the generals. I think it was Kempner. And he told Kempner that he wanted to get into combat because he was fed up with being a utility pilot, being a chauffeur, you know. And they assigned him to our squadron, and he was assigned to my flight. Now, James Blanchard was at least 6'2" and 220 pounds. He was so far over the legal limit. We had a legal limit of under 6 foot, and I think the weight limit was under 190 pounds or something like that. So the way I figure is that Blanchard, they used to have to practically tuck him into that cockpit, you know, because he's wearing all that stuff, and he's got a backpack on, a parachute backpack, and a vest and everything. And I think that he just couldn't get out of the airplane, and he was probably disabled, and they found the whole airplane in the canal. So, as a further aside, he gave me the name of the man who shot down my wingman. And then he gave me the name of the man that I was trying to shoot down. And I got an email about 2 years later from a man who was a member of the German Air Force. He was too young to be in World War II, but he was personal friends with the man that I was trying to shoot down that was in front of me. And they both lived in Nuremberg, and he's doing this with me by computer. Now, to this day, we're still in correspondence with each other. Richard Franz, who was my enemy in the ME-109, was an ace of some regard because he had 17 confirmed victories, and he had been in the Africa Corps, had considerable experience, and all of this stuff is on the internet. You know, it's all his version of the thing or my version, and it's so remarkable that, and we send each other birthday cards, and really I'm in a way I'm kind of glad that because he was shot down immediately and rendered impotent anyhow, that I didn't have to take him out, because we're friends to this day. But his buddy, the one that's too young, his name is Klaus Hastreiter, and he's a jet pilot of the German Air Force, fighter pilot also. And they have reunions, and he keeps me up to date on where they go and everything. And I'd love to have him come over here sometime, but I'd like to meet him in person. And he tells me about Richard Franz, but Richard Franz, he's 2 years younger than I am. So he's 88 years old. He's had some physical problems, but he doesn't run a computer. Doesn't even want to. And Klaus Hastreiter, his buddy that I correspond with, he's a computer expert. He worked for a German computer company till he just retired last year. So we have all kinds of good relations there. We, like I said, we exchange birthday cards and do that sort of thing.
It's fascinating.
So anyway, that was the end of Market Garden, and true to my luck, my unbelievable luck, my last mission, I did 71, and the last mission, they said to me, we want you to go down to the emergency strip at Manston, which was 10 miles below our base. Pick up a B-17, a B-24 that I have no pilots. They're being controlled by a mothership. We don't know what the mothership is, but you'll find it there. And they're the B-17, the B-20, B-24 are stripped down. They're being operated by radio, and they're loaded with 20,000 pounds of TNT in each one of them. All wired up, they've been stripped down of everything else. And the object is, you're to escort the three of them up the English Channel to the North Sea, and you make a right turn and take them over to Heligoland, which is an island fortress out in the North Sea in Germany, where they're going to dump these on the Germans. Now, it was a milk run of the absolute perfect sort, because going up the North Sea, going up the English Channel, there are no anti-aircraft out there. We're not going to get shot at out there. No fighters are going to challenge us because they were so hopelessly outnumbered by this time. They're not going to go after 3 airplanes anyway.
This was 1945?
No, it's 44.
Still 44,
yeah.
okay.
But by that time we had overwhelmed them with, you know, I've got 11 guys. They had guys stacked up waiting to come over to fight in the fighter pilot. So anyway, I took the history on this thing of, if you remember, John Kennedy's brother, Joe Kennedy, was a pilot in the Air Corps. He was flying one of these, they called them Aphrodites. In July, he and his co-pilot, before they could bail out, the thing blew up on him, killed both of them. And so what happens was that they would take off and set everything for the mothership, and then they would bail out. And each bomber pilot got credit for 5 missions for doing this. But in Joe's case, it didn't work out too well. But they had several targets in mind